It begins with a simple question. What if everything we've been told about our world, our history, and even our reality was only part of the story? From the whisper of ancient scriptures to the cold dust of Mars, from political secrets buried in 1933 to the silent battles over the future of our planet's climate, each story begins the same way, with certainty. The science is settled, the truth is known, but in every corner there are voices quietly asking, what if it isn't? In one room, men speak of the settled science of climate change, wondering how a field built on uncertainty became untouchable dogma. They trace the rise of CO2 from molecule to monster and question who profits from the fear. In another, explorers stare into the red deserts of Mars and the silvered plains of the Moon, seeing faces, angles, and towers that seem to defy nature, wondering whether what we're forbidden to see might rewrite human history itself. Elsewhere, a scholar peers into the Hebrew Bible and finds not myth, but dimensions, worlds layered atop our own, where the flood, the ark, and the birth of man may have unfolded in another plane of existence. And then, hidden within the archives of 1933, lies a story almost erased, a secret plan to overthrow the U.S. government itself, led not by enemies abroad, but by powerful men at home. Each tale stands alone, yet all are connected by curiosity, by skepticism, by the quiet pulse of the human spirit that refuses to stop asking, what if the truth was never meant to be found? These are not stories of conspiracy. They are stories of questions, the kind that shake the foundations of belief, that test what we call fact, and that dare to look behind the curtain of history, science, and power itself. Tonight, we journey through them, one by one, and uncover what might really be hidden behind them. The climate debate they don't want you to hear. On the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe sits down with a guest who questions one of the most powerful modern beliefs, that the science of climate change is settled. The conversation travels from the first Earth Day in 1970 to today's global net zero policies, exposing the money, politics, and fear that fuel environmental narratives. It's a discussion that challenges everything we're told to accept and asks whether saving the planet has quietly become a new form of control.
Now, what happened was there was, I would say, with the first Earth Day, 1970, there was a real change in the environmental movement. It began to focus much more strongly on the energy sector and much less on saving the whales. And there was a big difference. I mean, the energy sector involved trillions of dollars. The whales, not so much.
Right.
And at that time, it was cooling, this global mean temperature, which doesn't change much. But, you know, you focus on 1 degree, a half degree, so it looks like something. And it was cooling from the 1930s. 1930s were very warm, and it was getting cooler until the 70s. And that's why they were saying, well, you know, this is going to lead to an ice age. And they focused on that for a while. And then in the 70s, and at that time, well, what do you say? You know, if you're worried about an ice age, they said, well, it'll be the sulfates emitted by coal burning, because that reflects light, and the less light that we get, the colder we'll get. But then the temperature stopped cooling in the 70s and started warming. And that's when they said, well, you have to scare people with warming, and you can't use the sulfates anymore. But the scientist called Suki Manabe showed that even though CO2 doesn't do much in the way of warming, doubling it will only give you a half degree or so. But if you assumed that relative humidity stayed constant, so that every time you warmed a little, you added water vapor, which is a much more important greenhouse gas, you would double the impact of CO2, which now gives you a degree, which still isn't a heck of a lot, but still it was saying you could increase it. And that's when people started saying, well, now we better find CO2. It's increased because of industrialization and so on. And that began the demonization of CO2.
Do you think there's just always people that are going to point to anything like this that's difficult to define and use it to their advantage?
Oh, yeah, and this was a particular case. You wanted to deal, the energy sector is trillions of dollars. Anything you can do to overturn it, change it, replace fossil fuels, it's big bucks.
Right.
And one of the odd things, I think, in politics, I don't see it studied much, Congress can actually give away trillions of dollars. If you look at the McKinsey report on, eliminating CO2, net zero, they're saying it'll cost hundreds of trillions of dollars. Well, if you're giving out that much, you don't need that much of your politician. All you need is millions for your campaigning. And all you're asking are the recipients of people who are getting the money that you are giving them, 0.5%, 0.25%, you're golden. So that's much better than giving out 100,000 and having all of it back.
Well, the key, though, is also making it a subject that you cannot challenge. There's no room for any rational debate, and if you discuss it at all, you are now a climate change denier.
Yeah.
Which is like being an anti-vaxxer or, fill in the blank with whatever other horrible thing you could be called.
Now, that's a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, I was looking at it. On the one hand, you're told the science is settled. Thousands of the world's leading climate scientists all agree, which often makes you wonder. I mean, you went to college. How many climate scientists did you know? I mean, about 1,000. But on the other hand, if you read the IPCC reports, they're pointing out, for instance, that water vapor and clouds are much bigger than CO2, and we don't understand them at all. So here you have the biggest phenomena we don't understand at all, but the science is settled. Who knows what that means?
Well, it's also, there's this very bizarre dynamic of the Earth's temperature itself, which has never been static.
No. How would it remain static? That would involve a hugely reactive system.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But everyone seems to be buying this narrative that the science is settled and the Earth is warming, we have to act now.
You say everyone. I
don't
sure.
say everyone. A lot of politicians.
A lot of politicians are very attractive to this because it gives them power.
Right, and it's hard to define.
Yeah.
And you can argue, and if you argue against it, you're a bad person.
Well,
That's a good one.
You do all that, but we spend part of a year in France. My wife is French. Ordinary people, once you get to the countryside, don't take this all that seriously.
Right.
Here too, I suspect ordinary people have more skepticism than many people who are more educated.
Yes, but unfortunately, these ordinary people sometimes are impacted by these politicians' decisions where they have to, in the UK, they were getting rid of cows. They were forcing people to kill cows.
They're paying 3 times more for their heating and their electric bills.
Right.
I mean, it makes people poorer. It's making it almost impossible to electrify parts of the world that need it. And that involves billions of people. No, I mean, it's doing phenomenal damage and pain. But, I think for politicians and for many people who are well off, they need something that gives meaning to their life, and saving the planet seems sufficiently grandiose for their ambitions.
How are these net zero policies stopping people from getting electricity?
Well, by making it expensive, by eliminating fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are cheaper. At least the experience in the UK is when you switch to, quote, renewables, it tripled the price of electricity.
Right, but what I'm talking about is like third world countries, parts of the world that are undeveloped.
They can't afford it.
And that's all it is. They can't afford it.
Yeah.
But they also, if they didn't follow these net zero policies, what kind of plants are we talking about? Are we talking about coal plants?
Coal, anything, whatever is available.
Yeah.
I mean,
so you think even though coal does pollute the environment and it releases particulates, right? That's an issue, right?
How shall I put it? it's always a matter of cost. We have a plant, I think, in Alabama that has basically as clean as any other plant that burns coal. You can clean it, you can scrub it, you can get rid of almost everything except CO2.
Okay, so the particulates aren't as big of an issue as they used to be in the past. Is that
I
what it is?
agree.
They're more efficient. Okay.
Yeah.
So so this net zero thing is stopping them from installing modernized coal plants in parts of the world that do not have electricity, and the overall net negative weighs much heavier in not bringing these coal plants in.
I think so.
And not bringing these people into the first world.
Yeah, and there are, of course, the alternative natural gas and so on, which are available in places. There are places where you're lucky, like in Norway or Canada, Quebec, where you have hydro, which is intrinsically clean. But there's a problem with politicians. I remember once being in D.C. and some Republican politicians came and said, you know what we just did? We banned incandescent light bulbs. They said, wasn't that a great thing? I said, that's the stupidest thing I've heard today. What's the point? Because at the time, what was replacing it? Compact fluorescents, which were awful. All they had to do was wait and do nothing, and LEDs would come along, and people would say, okay, I prefer that. Instead, they feel they have to do something.
And they would switch to fluorescents, which turned out to be terrible for people. Yeah. So incandescents aren't bad for you?
They were simply less efficient than in terms of the number of watts of heat they generate versus light. I mean, LEDs are phenomenal that way.
Right. They're the best.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting when they have these decisions that they make like that do turn out to be negative ultimately, and that yet people still allow them to make silly decisions that don't seem to be making sense.
Yeah, I think there's an old cliche, money is the root of all evil.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. This is the disturbing thing that I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting, especially a lot of very polite, educated people that have followed the narrative that you follow if you're a good person and if you're a person who trusts science. And that is that, we have a serious problem. We have to address it now, or there will be no America for our grandchildren. This is the thing that we keep hearing.
You mentioned a tough thing there, the business trusts science.
Yes.
It's not a great idea because science is not a source of authority. It's a methodology. It's based on challenge.
Right.
And so,
where did this narrative come from then? Trust the science.
The success of science. In other words, this is a relatively new way to approach the world. I mean, a few hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion is, and I think it's been stated many times, you test things, and if they fail to predict correctly, they're wrong. So you find out what's wrong with them. You don't fudge them, or you don't change the rules. It's led to immense improvements in life, development of all sorts of things, and so it has a good reputation. Politicians have less of a reputation, so they wish to co-opt the reputation of science.
Yes, that's a very good point, because try finding a good politician that everybody agrees is rock solid. You can find plenty of science that everybody thinks is amazing.
Yeah.
Cell phone technology, nuclear power, so many things that people go, that's incredible that they did that.
Well, that's also confusing technology with science.
The result of science.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which is also an issue, right? And when you can get politicians to attach themselves to narratives that are supposedly connected to science.
Well, you mentioned Gore at the beginning.
Yes.
With that thing, he was showing this cycle of ice ages and CO2 and temperature going together. And it never bothered him that the temperature changed first and then the CO2.
Yeah, Greg Braden was on the podcast recently. He was explaining there have been times where the CO2 was much higher in the atmosphere, but the temperature was colder.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not like we can point to, look at the dinosaurs. We don't want to live the way the dinosaurs lived. Look how much CO2 they had. And then the other really inconvenient thing with CO2 is that the Earth is actually greener than it has been in a long time.
I mean, I think we'll speak to that, but I mean, essentially the increased amount of CO2 in the industrial era has added greatly to the arable land. And in fact, there's a funny story. Do you know the name E.O. Wilson? Have you ever heard that name?
I do. I have heard it, but I don't know where.
He was a biologist at Harvard. He wrote about sociobiology. His specialty were ants and bees and things, social insects. And he was giving a talk, and it came up for reasons that were not obvious to me. He was talking about the population of humanoids. And he was mentioning that you go back, a few 100,000 years, and you began the first humanoids, and they got to about a few million. But then during the last glacial maximum, the numbers went down to tens of thousands. There was a complete wipeout of humans. So I asked him afterwards, I said, do you think this could have anything to do with the fact that CO2 is so low that there was no food? And his response was to turn around and walk away.
That's an inconvenient truth, sir. It's just, to me, it's very strange to see an almost unanimous acceptance of that we have settled this, that the science is settled, from so many people on both the left and in academia, and even on the right. There's a lot of people on the right that believe that.
Yeah, I know. And it should be the first thing that makes you suspicious.
Yeah, right. There's a consensus.
Yeah, I mean, this is not how science is done.
Something that's never static.
What you just heard touches one of the most controversial divides in modern science, the question of whether climate change is an undeniable fact or a politicized movement. Here's what's true. The Earth's climate has always shifted. The 1930s were indeed unusually warm, and by the 1970s, scientists recorded a brief cooling trend that led to early speculation about a coming ice age. Historical data confirms that, but this cooling was minor and short-lived. By the late 1970s, global temperatures began rising again, a trend that continues today. The guest also mentioned Suki Manabe, a real Japanese-American scientist who won the 2021 Nobel Prize for climate modeling. Manabe demonstrated that rising carbon dioxide can amplify warming through water vapor feedback, a principle that remains a foundation of modern climate science. That part is accurate. However, the claim that CO2 does almost nothing or that it has been demonized misses critical context. CO2 may be a trace gas, but it traps heat effectively. Since the Industrial Revolution, carbon levels have risen from about 280 parts per million to over 420, the highest in at least 800,000 years. Satellite data, glacier melt, and ocean heat measurements all show a direct correlation between this rise and Earth's warming trend. The idea that politicians use climate fear for profit isn't entirely false either. Major subsidies and industries now depend on the green economy, from carbon credits to renewable investments. But political motives do not erase the overwhelming physical evidence of human-driven warming. There's also a rarely discussed truth buried in the conversation. More CO2 does make plants grow faster. NASA satellite imagery confirms a 10% global greening effect over the last 35 years, mostly due to rising carbon dioxide and improved agricultural efficiency. Yet this benefit doesn't offset the risks: melting ice, rising seas, and disrupted weather patterns that threaten billions. At its core, this clip exposes a dangerous oversimplification, not just from climate skeptics, but from both sides. Science is not settled, but neither is it a hoax. It's a constantly evolving process of evidence, challenge, and correction. And that's the paradox of our age. The truth about climate change lies not in the extremes, but in the uncomfortable middle, a place where both fear and denial lose their power. The hidden faces on Mars, evidence of an ancient human empire. He's one of the most listened to voices in the world, Joe Rogan, sitting across from a guest who claims humanity's true history stretches beyond Earth itself. It begins with a photograph, a strange formation on the surface of Mars that looks uncannily human, a face staring back at us from another planet. At first, scientists dismissed it as a trick of light, a natural shadow, but the more they looked, the stranger it became. Perfect angles, geometric patterns, and a mystery that refused to die. What if the monuments on Mars and the hidden structures on our moon weren't alien at all, but remnants of us?
Like I remember when they were talking about things like the face on Mars, and you're like, what? That sounds so kooky. And then you see pictures, you go, hey man, what is that? Why don't I hear about that in school?
Yeah, well, we had Richard Hoagland on
Yes.
night after night after night after night for weeks on end
Yes.
when that came out. And
Yes.
actually, that face on Mars had a lot to do with my career path, actually. 'Cause
Well, so what is your take on all this? Because one of the things that happened was with the face on Mars is the initial images were very grainy but fascinating, because it did kind of look like a face, but maybe even more remarkable, because sometimes there's faces like in the side of a rock, it looks like a face. More remarkable was the geometric pattern of the base of it.
Yeah.
And so I kind of dismissed that when the second images came out. So this is the original image. This is the original image that freaked everybody out. They were like, oh my God, there's a face on Mars. And then they came up with these upgraded images, and I was like, well, that's not a face. It's just weird shadows, and it's probably just a mountain. But man, that's an odd shape.
Or that face has been doctored.
It could be true.
Yeah.
But also, then I looked at it and was like, that shape is interesting. Like it almost looks unnatural. Then the new images from very close to Cydonia that show a very clear square. This one's nuts, because this one is somewhere in the neighborhood of between plus 300 meters. Like they don't know how much longer it is than 300 meters, but it's the minimum size of this thing is 300 meters across, and it's a full-on square. Right angle, right. It's like, what the hell is that?
Well,
Pull that picture up, Jimmy.
As a geologist, I was fascinated when Hoagland first started talking about what was happening here. So,
What's up, Jamie? Oh, that one. Yeah, the one that we bring up all the time.
Which one though?
Oh, it don't matter.
Some of
Just
them are
click on
doctored.
any of them.
Some of them are doctored though.
Yeah, the non-doctored one, the one next to it, like right there. Look at that. That's absolutely crazy.
So I don't know if I'm very familiar with this image. I don't know if you can see with your mind's eye. You're looking the lower left. That's a 90-degree angle. If you can see the rest of the 90-degree angle up at the top and over at the side, if you can trace out, that is one massive, right there. Now you can see it. Yeah, the computer has cleaned it up. Nature does not work in 90-degree angles. You're not going to get wind erosion. Wind is called aeolian erosion. Fluvial erosion is water erosion. You're not going to get 90-degree angles from wind or water. So one of the tenets in archaeology, when you see 90-degree angles, there's an intentionality underlying that structure. If it were a one-off, you could say maybe it's a fluke, and it's not. And this is on Mars. Jamie, I don't know if you can do this. Through Freedom of Information, NASA had to release all of the lunar images up through the Clementine mission. And they didn't want to do that. And when they did release them, they ended up pixeling out a whole bunch of stuff, which made it look even more obvious than it was.
They're just fucking with us at this point.
So you got to say, what is it on the lunar surface that we paid for with our tax dollars that we're not supposed to be seeing? And these were tower structures. Can you see the Clementine?
Are there any undoctored, unblurred versions of it that some
I haven't
nerd
seen them
has
in the
snuck out of
public.
the office?
I haven't seen them in the public domain.
But you've seen them privately?
No, but what I'm saying is through Freedom of Information,
Right, but have you ever seen the undoctored images?
No, what they were forced to release. Why in the world would they be pixelating the images that are on there that actually make them look even more obvious than they are? So what we're seeing, what Hoagland was talking about, what you're seeing on Mars is not happening in a vacuum. It's happening, we're seeing the same thing on the lunar surface to varying degrees. On Mars, there were 3-sided, 4-sided, 5-sided pyramids.
Look at the one in the upper right-hand corner. That's odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very odd.
So here's the kicker. We're sending the Viking probes, Viking 1, Viking 2 in the 70s, went to Mars. 19,000 images were captured from the orbiting part of the mission. The other craft landed on the surface, and I can just imagine being on the surface seeing this. It's like this thing looks like a spider comes down the cloud of dust, and this little tube pops up, and some sticky dental floss stuff shoots out, and then they reel it in to collect dirt and microbes, and they reel it into broth because they're looking for evidence of life on Mars, and it's happening next to massive monuments and geometric structures that are now dated about 50,000 years BP before present. So they're looking for microbes and signs of life next to the most massive signs of life that you could imagine.
These, you said they're dated to 50,000 BC, these structures? BP, before present.
Before present, yeah.
So how do they know that?
Those were, when the Cydonia mission, that's the Cydonia scientists are estimating 50,000 years, and the same with the lunar. I mean, I'm hesitating.
But the Sidonian, how do they estimate that? If they're using probes from that far away?
They're using probes, and I think geologically they're using, it's relative dating. You know, they're looking at strata and things like that. And from the lunar sites, you know, they brought back samples. And yeah, I'm hesitating because I don't know how deep you want to go with all this, but
as deep as you want.
Well, the samples that came back from the lunar surface had traces of metals that do not occur naturally in nature. They are the product of advanced machinery. And
what metals are these?
These were metals that came back when they brought back from the Apollo mission, and I think they brought back. Oh, I need to remember the names. That's one Jamie can look up. What the metals were that came back, and they don't know where those metals came from.
So is this metals from Cydonia, or is this metals from the moon?
This is from the lunar sites in the craters.
So the structures on the moon, how old they think they're the same age as the structures on Cydonia?
They're estimating 50,000 BP. You know, there's a race for the moon right now, and I'm fascinated by this. You know, there was a time only 2 nations on Earth had the money and the technology to go to the moon. It was the former Soviet Union and the former United States, because neither one's the same country anymore. And both those countries have been so broke, they haven't been able to do it. India and China are now sending the probes to the moon. We were going to the moon during the Cold War, and it was a crazy time. It was actually a very civilized war. I mean, the governments were at war, but the scientists were still cooperating. And there was an agreement that we would not share publicly what was found on the lunar surface. And Russia did the same thing. But China was never part of that agreement. So China has said when they land, they're going to televise live what they find on the lunar surface to the people of the Earth. My sense, Joe, and this will lead into a whole conversation we're going to have here, I think they'll find the archaeological structures that we know are there, that we've seen in the photographs. The inscriptions on those structures we're going to be able to read, because there's a thinking that those structures are from ETs from another time, but the evidence suggests they're from us, from a time in our past, a cycle of civilization where we did great and beautiful things by working together until we destroyed one another through war, and that we're repeating that cycle again. So when they
Isn't that like drawing a lot of conclusions? Isn't there other possibilities for what happened to them?
Well, this is where I'm going with this. When they see what's on those temple walls, they're going to see inscriptions in languages that we already recognize, and that will be the smoking gun, like cuneiform.
Why do you think that?
Because this is what the researchers who are working on these projects right now, and they're combining this with so many of what the ancient texts have always told us. And this is where, it gets into a really a kind of a sticky conversation, because it depends on how people interpret these things. I'm excited for it for this reason. This is obviously no ordinary time in the history of our world, and they're pushing for war. We're on the verge of global war. What would it mean if we found on the surface, on the lunar surface, evidence of us, humans from another time, leaving a message in our own languages, cuneiform, Sanskrit, those kinds of things. It could be one of the most unifying factors right when we're on the precipice of war.
I completely agree, but we have to make a lot of leaps in order for that to be real. Like, we haven't seen any writing, so why would they assume that there's a bunch of different kinds of writing in different languages?
Actually, I think they have seen.
Who's they?
Well, when our space program, I think you've had guests on that have talked about this in the past, I think. When our space program was active, there were broadcasts from the lunar surface that were cut off, and astronauts had seen things that they were not allowed to see and not allowed to share.
That's what I heard. It sounds fun.
Yeah.
It sounds really fun. I want to believe that.
Well, and
But
some of them are leaving this world now, and on their deathbed, they can't believe that this hasn't been made public already. So there have been, recordings and videos and things, and I think they're authentic.
Right, but this does it. Like, we haven't got boots on the ground in Cydonia, right? So
no,
like,
not Cydonia. Cydonia is Mars.
Well, exactly. So how are they seeing these inscriptions? Are you saying these inscriptions are on the moon?
Yeah, lunar surface. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
lunar
I
surface.
was confused. So these astronauts are saying that on the surface of the moon, they saw writing.
They've seen structures.
Structures.
Massive structures.
But what about the writing?
There. There were reports that they had seen the writing, but we can't verify those.
Okay. So this is just podhead talk.
Well, yes and no.
Kind of, a little bit, because if there's no evidence at all, that is not even an interview with a guy who talks about when I was on the moon, I saw writing.
Well, then this is where you start going into the ancient texts.
Okay.
And the traditions that are relating our relationship to intelligences from beyond this world.
Yes, there's a lot of that.
And there's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that in various religions too. It's very fascinating.
Well, this is what I think is important. It is in religions, but I think you can break out. There are historical texts and there's religious texts. So if you're reading the Bible, there's religion and history in the Bible. If you're looking at Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian texts from the Mesopotamian era, they're telling similar stories, and you've had guests on talking about this, where the stories are similar, but the religion is not part of that. And so I think what we're doing, we're kind of beating around the bush to a deeper conversation here, and that's why I've hesitated a couple of times, because I just don't want us to, to get so far down one side that...
Oh, don't worry about that. That's what this show's all about.
Okay, all right.
We should call the show Rabbit Holes. Because people are always in the middle of talking about one thing and they pivot. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think this is all tied into disclosure and what's happening, the reluctance to have the full disclosure.
Right. We've talked about that multiple times.
Yeah.
I'm sure were you in that documentary, The Age of Disclosure?
No.
You've been in a lot of documentaries.
I have been in a lot.
It's hard to remember.
I've been in a lot, and a lot of what I said was left on the cutting room floor.
Always.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. One thing I learned, Joe, and maybe you've learned this as well, if you're going to be in the documentary, ask if you are on the front end of the filming or the back end of the filming.
What does that mean?
Here's the reason. Are you one of the early interviews or are you one of the later interviews?
Okay.
And here's the reason. They'll develop an arc and a storyline. And if you're early on, they're going to ask you questions to support that arc and that storyline. 5 interviews down, somebody's going to come on and they're going to introduce something, and the producer's going to say, oh, there's a new arc and a new storyline, and now everything that you interviewed for may not be relevant in that conversation anymore. So,
well, I don't think you can control that. So
you can ask. You just ask. You say, where am I in the shooting process? And if you're the first one, say, maybe come back and interview me.
Yeah. So
a little bit later on.
Is it your belief that there was a civilization on Mars that were us, and that we migrated to Earth and then eventually populated Earth? Is that what you're thinking? Or that we coexisted in both places?
I think we did. And
It sounds so crazy to say.
Really?
And yeah, it does. It does. Well, you probably travel in different circles. But I mean, to the rational people, most people hear that and they go, what, there were people on Mars? But as time goes on and more discoveries, we find out just about the structures that are on Earth and how old they might be. And the actual age of Homo sapiens, like how old we might actually be. Where a lot of, like, they found that skull in China the other day. That was, have you seen this? It's a 1,000,000-year-old Homo sapien skull, but apparently there's some debate about it. They're going back and forth. But at the very least, it's in the conversation of human beings possibly have existed, at least in this form, for 1,000,000 years, which is kind of nuts.
The face on Mars was first photographed by NASA's Viking 1 orbiter in 1976 in a region called Cydonia. Early images did appear to show a massive human-like face carved into the Martian surface, sparking decades of speculation from researchers like Richard Hoagland, who claimed it was proof of a lost civilization. But when NASA returned with higher resolution images in 1998 and again in 2001, the illusion broke. The so-called face was nothing more than a natural mesa, a mountain plateau shaped by erosion, its features exaggerated by low sunlight and camera noise. It was one of the most famous examples of pareidolia, the human brain's instinct to see faces in random patterns, the same way we see shapes in clouds or saints on toast. As for the right angles and structures on Mars, modern geology provides a simpler explanation. Volcanic fracturing, tectonic stresses, and erosion can form near-perfect angles, especially on a planet that's been geologically dead for millions of years. The square formations and pyramid shapes seen in later missions are fascinating, but not proof of design. Then comes the moon. Claims that NASA blurred or pixelated images from the Clementine mission have circulated online for years. In truth, the images were compressed to save bandwidth in the 1990s, not censored. No credible evidence has ever shown artificial structures on the lunar surface. Yet, beneath all this skepticism lies a powerful question. Why does this idea persist? Because it speaks to something ancient in us, the yearning to believe we're not the first, that another civilization, human or not, once touched the stars before falling into myth. And while no probe has ever confirmed ruins on Mars or inscriptions on the moon, one fact remains hauntingly real. Mars and Earth once shared similar conditions. Rivers, oceans, atmospheres. Life could have begun there. Maybe not as an empire, but perhaps as a whisper of what was to come here. Did the Bible's stories happen in another dimension? In this episode of The Joe Rogan Experience, the conversation takes a turn few have ever considered. A scholar translating the Hebrew Bible makes a shocking claim that stories like Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah may not have happened on Earth at all. Instead, he suggests they unfolded in an alternate dimension, a parallel layer of reality that slowly merged with our own. To Joe Rogan, it sounds wild. To others, it could rewrite the origins of human history and religion itself.
So this is kind of crazy. We didn't know they could do that back then.
Well, before coming out here, I asked ChatGPT, how old are some of the stories written down in the text in the Hebrew Bible? And at least according to ChatGPT, it's 10,000 years ago. So
oh my God,
something may have happened at that time.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very interesting finding. Oh, Sodom and Gomorrah, that's a great story. I'm working on this translation of the Hebrew Bible. I've got a Substack now. I've been putting out things every week, a chapter a week.
Yeah.
On my translation of the Bible, it's like 1,000 pages right now of commentary about the language and the grammar, the meaning, what's called the plain meaning of the text. Like there was a Noah with 3 sons and went on the ark. Yeah, so that's like my big project, but I'd like to do a smaller one about Sodom and Gomorrah and the figure of Lot. I think that's a really incredible story. I've spent about maybe 2 to 3 weeks looking at that. Lot, his virgin daughters, the men circling his house, they're asking to know him. He ends up, in a cave with his 2 virgin daughters. They get him drunk, and he sleeps with them. or they lie with him anyway. Yeah, and out come two kids at a certain point, and they become very important. Later on, they're the beginning of the messianic line. So it's a very intricate, tale with a very. I think you can make some cool conversations between some of the main personages in the narrative. There was a book called The Red Tent.
Can I ask you about the lot? Like, how old was that story?
Wow, that must be. Well, it's an explanation of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is the around the Dead Sea. There was a conflagration of some sort there. Have any of your guests spoken about Sodom? What actually happened around the Dead Sea? It was quite catastrophic.
Well, tell us.
Well, the story of Lot. Yeah, I mean there was fire and sulfur pouring down on Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, it was the end of the plain. Yeah, so that's the southern part of the Dead Sea. It is a Dead Sea because of its high salt concentrations. It was kind of closed off from the coast. So it's at least a description of what took place.
What do you think it's describing?
Well, I mean, my perspective is
a volcano?
It actually happened. Yeah, but people think a volcano, some kind of volcanic activity.
It totally sounds like a volcano, right? And we know that there's been a bunch of those that have almost wiped people out entirely at certain points. The Toba volcano, that one?
No.
We got down to, I think we've looked this up before, but I want to say they think we might have gotten down to just a few thousand people.
On the whole planet?
Like 70,000 years ago. 70,000 years ago, there was a massive supervolcano that went off, and it, plunged the Earth probably into nuclear winter. And they think that our genetic line entirely of the human race on Earth came from this few thousand survivors.
Joe, can we take a
yes.
a break?
You gotta pee?
Yeah.
Yes. We'll be right back, folks.
Seriously.
We're back.
Yeah, so we were talking about the alternative.
Yes. Explain
universe.
What you mean by that. Like, that these things are happening in an alternative dimension.
Right. Yeah, I think they're happening in an alternative dimension. Like when you smoke DMT, you return to the same place each time. So there seems to be some reality, some DMT world that people enter into. And it's one of my volunteers, one of the subjects in the DMT research. He got a big dose one day, and then a few months later, he got another big dose. And he said that, it was very interesting, he said things have just continued apace since his first exposure and his first entrance into that state. And things had gone on in the meantime. And he re-entered that world. So in that way, there's in that same manner, the world of the Hebrew Bible early on, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel, all that took place at some different level of reality, which gradually made its way into ours. And once it made its way into ours, there's the archaeological evidence, the first temple, second temple, and so on. So there is a transition between, our world and that world kind of merged. But in the beginning, it was an alternative dimension. It's the same God, I think, but different dimensions.
So, is this your own personal conclusion?
Yeah. Well, when I was on the show last time, you're asking if I believe those things took place, and my answer then was I take it as if it were true.
Right.
And then I started to think, how I would do that. Like, in what world would that be true? It'd be a different world.
Right. I feel like I've always believed that they were trying to record something. I just didn't always trust that human beings were completely honest with their recollection of events. So that there's something that they were trying to write down. But was it really coming from God? Are these accurate events? What exactly happened with Noah and the ark? Like what really happened?
Well, 3 stories. Three levels. 2 of each, then 7 of one pair or 7 pairs of birds. Well, of every living thing.
Yeah, but like how's he feeding them? Animals eat other animals. The whole thing's nuts. You would need a lot more rabbits. You need so many animals to keep just the lions alive.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. How's he getting them all from all over the world into his stupid boat?
Yeah.
There's so many things that are wrong.
Yeah.
But the story of him being told that some shit is about to go down, and you probably should, find some way to restart your version of civilization somewhere. There's probably multiple like the flood myth that we, whatever you want to call it, the stories of the flood that you get from Epic of Gilgamesh, that you get from Noah. It's not just those. There's many different cultures all throughout history have a flood story, right? So it's probably likely that some crazy shit went down.
There may have been, there most likely was a flood. So what do you learn from it? Like how do you do better, or on what basis do you rebuild? So I think there's different models. The biblical one is interesting because it's lineage, from Adam to Noah,
right,
to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob and the tribes, and now.
So when you talk about things happening in an alternative dimension, like, is that what you think, like, the birth of mankind is as well, like Adam and Eve?
Well, I mean...
Pull this microphone up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It just has an impact.
Yeah. Well, the creation story. Man was created on the 6th day.
Right.
Along with mammals. It's a cool story. It's stages. Like people say, well, 7 days, that's unlikely. Like that creation took place 7 times 24. I don't know, 148. Something like that. 148 hours, 168 hours. The whole world was created. But it's broken into stages. 7 stages. Which is one of the translations of the word that is usually translated day. It could also mean stage. It's the word yom. It can mean either a day, a period of time, a stage. So that's that's the answer that makes sense to me about the 7-day story of creation. Yeah. So man was created on the 6th day. And then was placed in the Garden of Eden, and those events took place. The stories themselves are just they're written down, and so people have been studying them for thousands of years.
Who do you think Lilith was?
No mention of Lilith in the Bible.
Really?
Yeah.
Where's the story of Lilith emerge?
Well, it comes from what's called midrash.
What's that?
Comes from a root, darash. It means to, explicate, to expand upon, to investigate. So what happened after Adam and Eve sinned? Did they have sex again? And they do have Cain and Abel and the ensuing stories. And then there's a third son, Shet, who is the inheritor of Adam's of his traits, his good traits and bad traits. He's like God as well. So there's a distinct lineage that is spelled out. Lilith was a demon that she slept with Adam after the sin of eating from the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. So there's a story that built up around the biblical story that they were separated. Adam and Eve were separated for a long period. And so who was Adam sleeping with? Well, it was expanded in the Midrash that there was a demoness named Lilith who slept with Adam for a couple hundred years. And then Adam and Eve reconciled.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, so Lilith she doesn't appear in the text of the Hebrew Bible as such. So nobody knows. There's a mythology that's grown around Lilith as well. Well, isn't there some festival, some music festival called the Lilith Festival?
Lilith Fair.
Yeah. That's named after the spirit the demoness who's.
You sure it wasn't like a lady named Lilith that she came up with it? Are we sure?
It was her neighbor, Lilith Smith.
The idea that the events of the Bible, from Eden to the Great Flood, occurred in another dimension isn't new, but it's never been presented quite like this. It blends ancient theology with modern theories of consciousness, psychedelics, and even quantum reality. In the podcast, the guest compares biblical reality to the DMT experience, a place that people claim to visit again and again, where time moves differently and consciousness seems to continue beyond the body. To him, the Bible's earliest stories, Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, the Tower of Babel, may have taken place in a world like that. Not a metaphor, but a parallel dimension that eventually bled into ours. But what do we actually know? Historically, the oldest written parts of the Hebrew Bible, like the early Genesis accounts, likely date back between 1000 and 600 BCE, not 10,000 years ago as mentioned in the clip. However, many of those stories are based on much older oral traditions, some tracing back over 4,000 years to the ancient Sumerians and Akkadians. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, describes a flood almost identical to Noah's, written centuries before the Hebrew Bible. The dimension theory, while fascinating, doesn't have evidence in archaeology or physics, but in a symbolic sense, it mirrors something real, the evolution of human consciousness. Our ancestors did experience reality differently, through myth, trance, and altered states that shaped the world's first religions. The line between spiritual experience and material history was once blurred. To them, heaven and earth weren't separate worlds. They were layers of the same dream. Even the story of Lilith, discussed near the end of the podcast, shows how myth evolves. She never appeared in the original Hebrew Bible. She emerged centuries later from Midrash, Jewish mystical commentary, and even older Babylonian demon legends. Over time, she became a symbol of forbidden desire, female rebellion, and the darkness that lingers outside Eden's gates. So while there's no scientific proof of an alternate dimension where biblical events occurred, the metaphor still resonates. Maybe the real story isn't about another world at all, but about how the ancient human mind could turn memory into myth and myth into scripture. The secret 1933 coup to overthrow the U.S. government. It's one of the darkest stories in American history, one so shocking that it sounds like fiction. In this Joe Rogan Experience episode, the conversation starts with memories of tragedy and turns into a revelation about a moment when America nearly stopped being a democracy. In 1933, a decorated Marine general named Smedley Butler claimed that a group of powerful bankers and businessmen tried to recruit him to lead a military coup against President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Their plan: replace the president with a fascist dictatorship backed by Wall Street. And what's most chilling, it almost worked.
And so I was in the World Trade Center the day before it went down, like damn, I didn't even notice how great this ceiling was and how much detail they put into shit. And I got on the train, went to Will's crib, and then I got a ride home that night. So next morning, my sister woke me up, and I'm like watching the first tower with a plane sticking out of it. Wow. And then I was like, yesterday. There. And then I'm watching. I was like, that ain't no another plane. I was like, did it? And then I almost hit under the bed.
How far away were you miles-wise?
I was in Long Island. So
50?
50, like an hour drive.
Yeah.
But I was like, we're under attack. Yeah. And you're like, I don't know where these attacks are coming from. And I don't normally feel like a coward. But I was like, where they gonna attack next?
Yeah.
You know? So it was just that type of a vibe. But
I'm worried that another one of those is coming. And the danger of that is obviously people are gonna die, and obviously it could be horrific if something does happen, if a terrorist attack does happen. But the one thing, it'll wake people up to like what the consequences of what we do overseas. It means something here. It's not just a video on your phone.
It
People
does.
are dying.
Yeah.
And we are funding it. And there's real evil in the world. Evil's a real thing. You could not believe in the devil and you could not believe in God, but evil actions are documented throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one way to combat evil. You know, you have to have a strong force of good, but that good has to be really good. It has to actually be good. And if it's pretending to be good and it's actually participating in evil, and then you find out about it and you're like, well, what the fuck? This was like in 1933. This guy Smedley Butler, Major General Smedley Butler, he wrote a book called War is a Racket in 1933.
Damn, that's early.
1933.
That's pretty early.
And he broke down how he thought he was over here to protect people, but he was really there to make it safe for bankers or do whatever the fuck he had to do, control oil and control whatever minerals or gold or whatever the hell they were doing. But he realized at the end of his career, war is a racket.
Yeah.
And this is 33, man. They tried to get him to overthrow the government.
The American government?
They tried to get him to participate in a military coup against the government.
Who was in charge back then?
We just
like
went
before
over this the
our
other
time.
day, right? Jamie will pull it up.
Right.
It was before our time. So I think this happened prior to that. So 32 maybe, something like that.
Some Woodrow Wilson shit?
Some old-timey shit. They just got away with things back then. And now they have to hide it on layers and layers and layers of special interest groups and NGOs and money being flowed around, and it's all bullshit. And that bullshit is all over the news, and everyone's confused, and everyone thinks it's the good guys versus the bad guys. And the more people get scared, the more people start looking for white hats and black hats.
And confusion is the greatest weapon.
So here it is, 33, United States, okay. The business plot called the Wall Street Putsch was the White House push. Is that push?
Putsch, you said it right, because it's a German word, because they had putches in Germany.
So it was a conspiracy in 33 in the United States to overthrow the government of the president of Franklin D. Roosevelt and install Smedley Butler as dictator. A retired military corps major general testified under oath that wealthy businessmen were plotting to create a fascist veterans organization with him as its leader and use it as a coup d'etat to overthrow Roosevelt. So they almost overthrew Roosevelt. Imagine if he went along with that. In 34, Butler testified under oath before the United States House of Representatives Special Committee on Un-American Activities on these revelations. Although no one was prosecuted, no one was prosecuted. That's wild.
Typical.
Even back then, they were full of shit. That's 90 years ago. The Congressional Committee final report said there is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient. Motherfuckers, man.
I mean,
these motherfuckers have been dirty from the jump.
Day one. I mean,
dirty from day one.
Yeah, dirty from day one. Smedley, God bless him, with that face, I wouldn't trust him, but he was more trustworthy than his face. He had Cash Patel eyes.
He probably needed glasses. They had shitty glasses back then.
Yeah, shitty glasses. He has those Cash Patel eyes, like, Cash, like, do something to look more believable.
When you're not telling the truth and you're doing that, it's a problem.
It's a problem. It's like, Like,
Bro, imagine that job. Like you say, I'm gonna uncover the truth, and you get into office, and they're like, "This is where your kids sleep. This is where your mom lives. This is."
yeah. It's cold.
It's cold. Like, no, you realize how deep the web runs, and how the web's gonna be there after you're gone. You're gonna be here for 4 years. You know, while this guy's the president, and as soon as he's out, once we take over again,
Like the promise of something better from either party, because both of them ain't shit.
This wasn't a rumor. It was real. In 1933, Major General Smedley Darlington Butler, one of the most respected Marines in U.S. history, testified before Congress that wealthy elites, including executives connected to J.P. Morgan, DuPont, and General Motors, had approached him with an offer: lead 500,000 veterans in a march on Washington, overthrow Roosevelt, and install a new Secretary of General Affairs. That man would secretly control the nation while the president remained a powerless figurehead. The plan became known as the Business Plot, or the Wall Street Putsch, named after the Nazi coups happening in Germany at the same time. Butler exposed it before it began, testifying under oath to the House Special Committee on Un-American Activities in 1934. The committee confirmed the plot was discussed and planned, but no one was ever prosecuted. The media downplayed the story, calling it exaggerated or fantastic. But the official congressional report still exists, a document that quietly admits that the coup could have succeeded if Butler hadn't come forward. So why don't we learn this in school? Because it reveals a truth few want to confront, that America's democracy has been tested not just by enemies abroad, but by its own wealthy elite, those willing to trade freedom for profit and power. Smedley Butler later wrote a book titled War is a Racket, exposing how U.S. military interventions often served corporate interests rather than national defense. His words still echo today. I helped make Mexico safe for American oil interests. I helped purify Nicaragua for the banking house of Brown Brothers. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues. The business plot failed, but it left a blueprint, a warning that democracy isn't guaranteed by votes or flags, but by the courage of those willing to expose the system when it turns against the people.